I'm Tim Thomas.
And my name's Andrew Upton.
This is my Grand Arbiter Augustin, the 4th EDH deck.
So Tim, why did you pick Grand Arbiter?
Alright, so for as long as I've been playing EDH, I've loved blue. I mean, it's just so powerful. You can do so many different things. And basically, whenever I'm not playing blue, I just feel like stuff happens I just can't say no to that just wrecks the game state. So I wanted to play blue. More specifically, I wanted to play blue-white because it just has answers to so many different things. It can control pretty much every aspect of the board state.
Okay. Now you know that Grand Arbiter is one of the most hated generals out there.
He gets a lot of hate because he speeds up your spells while he does tax everybody else. I don't normally play it like most people. A lot of people just stack on the prison effects and more taxing effects. Just make people hate to play Magic because they just can't do anything. I don't normally play it that way because it's just really obnoxious.
Alright, you want to move on to Memories?
Sure. Alright, so first off, we got the best card in Magic, Island. I mean, it's one of the full arts from Zendikar. They just look the best other than the Unhinged lands. They're a little bit more expensive, so I don't have them. Alright. Then next...
How many islands do you have?
There's 5 islands. I didn't really pay too much attention when I was doing the colors. So there's 5 islands and there's 5 planes. I've got all these in foil. I love the art on this. It's one of from the original Mirrodin set. So there's that. Then for mana fixing, always got to have the original duel. Right now, mine's Proxy. I'm working on picking one up. My play group, personally, some of us play with proxies. Some of the cards get hard to find. Alright, then we got the Shockland Hallowed Fountain. It's the one from Return to Ravnica. They're easier to get since it's new access. Gotta have the Shocklands. They're easily fetchable. Which brings us to the fetch lands. I play the Misty and the Scalding Tarn just because, I mean, they're blue fetch lands. I love them. I probably shouldn't have them in there for flavor reasons, but I do anyway. Alright. Then we get the Glacial Fortress. It's from the core set duels. They come into play untapped if you control a plains or an island. So pretty often they'll come in untapped. Then you have the Mystic Gate, the Filter Land. Some of the cards get expensive color-wise, like Cryptic Command and everything. They get hard to play. Right. Celestial Colonnade. The man lands are some of the best lands in the game. They're insane. This one, for 3 a blue and a white, can turn into a 4/4 flyer with Vigilance. So it just is insane. Then we have Nimbus Maze. It's a pretty unique dual land from Future Sight. If you control an island, it can tap for a white. If you control a plains, it can tap for a blue. Or basically, it just taps for a colorless. Sajiri Refuge comes in tapped, gains you a life. Just extra mana fixing. Since you're a control deck, you don't have to worry too much about the beginning turns. Which also includes the Guild Gate. Just really good mana fixing. You never want your mana to be off in a control deck, because that's how you just get swamped and get behind. Moving us on to Command Tower. Taps for any color, really basic. One of the best lands in the deck. Alright. Also we have Skycloud Expanse. Pay 1, tap it, add a blue and a white to your mana pool, similar to the Signets. Color fixing. A Dark Waste, the Pain lands. They're not very good, but it's mana fixing. So then we have my land destruction spells I really enjoy. Start off with the most obvious Strip Mine, destroy any land. Really good for just taking out those pesky non-basics and just other lands. Then we have Wasteland, destroys target non-basic land. They can all tap for colorless, so it's really useful in that regard. Just take out annoying lands. Ghost Quarter. I play the full suite of them just because other lands get really hard to deal with, and they can just take over games. This is Tectonic Edge. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it. Destroy target non-basic land if its controller controls 4 or more lands, which generally they do in EDH, so it's close in power level to Wasteland. Then we have Dust Bowl. Dust Bowl is really good in the fact that it can, over time, just take out multiple lands. You can pay 3, tap it, and sacrifice any land to destroy a non-basic land. So, I mean, it's really good if people have, like, ways to recur their lands.
And, I mean, it's recurable land destruction. That's never bad. Also, since you're in a control deck, you're never really missing land drops anyway. So, you'll actually hit their land drops. If your opponent stumbles, you can punish them for it.
Exactly. And I play both of the cycle lands, the ones that cycle for 1 mana. They're just really good. It's a land if you need a land drop. It's card draw if you need it. It just cantrips.
Yeah, it's just late game when you have only lands. You know, it's not just a land. You can actually draw another card that's actually action.
Exactly. Which brings us to Tolaria West. It comes in tapped. It can tap for a blue. You can transmute it for 1 blue, and search for any card with converted mana cost 0. And so it can find you any of your other lands or anything like that. There's a lot of really good lands, which will actually bring us to the utility lands, which we'll start with one of the most obvious, Maze of Ith. Just untap target attacking creature, and it deals or receives no combat damage this turn. Really good all-around card for saving you.
It doesn't tap for mana though, unless someone has an Urborg out. Then it taps for colorless,
which does get in the way sometimes. Mystifying Maze. This one actually does tap for mana, but it is more expensive. You have to pay 4 in tap, and you can exile target attacking creature an opponent controls at the beginning of the next end step, returning to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So it does get worse with creatures with enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield abilities. But I mean, with creatures with like counters that are just really big beat sticks, it's a great answer for them.
And it just some generals, for example, like Rafik, who just gets really big and they're trying to kill you with their general. Like, it's really good in general just because you get it, because you can stop them from killing you with general damage. 21 general damage, if you didn't know, kills you in EDH. You start with 40 life points. So stopping someone from dealing half the damage they should be able to is really good.
Exactly, and it works with Animar too. Like if they get greedy and start trying to swing and everything, you can just reset it. Then there's Reliquary Tower. This deck's going to draw a lot of cards. There's going to be probably at some point in the game that you're going to have more than 7 in hand. So you don't want to have to be discarding, because you are going to be using your cards to mess with other people. Riptide Lab. This card is the nuts. There's just so many good wizards out there that this card can just abuse. Just pay 1 in a blue, tap it, and return a wizard you control to its owner's hand. This card is just insane.
And all wizards have really good end of the battlefield effects. Overall, Snapcaster Mage, Venser, Shaper Savant, everything like that. They're all really good. So returning to your hand to do them again is never bad.
Exactly. And like Trinket Mage as well. Then there's Academy Runes. This is a card I really love with card Expedition Map, which we will get to later. You just find it immediately, and you can just start abusing it every turn. And it's just really good if some of your key artifacts go to the graveyard or whatever.
It's recursion. It's never bad. It's in land, so they can counter it.
And then Vesuva. It can copy any of your awesome lands that aren't legendary. Or it can copy any of your opponent's awesome lands or anything like that. Or if you want to blow up somebody else's legendary. Just a really great card.
It's versatile. It's also strip mine. So, strip mine sometimes for legendary lands are kind of cool. It does enter the battlefield tapped, though, which is my least favorite thing about it.
Yep. So then we'll move on to artifacts. First off, since we did mention Trinket Mage, I'm going to start off. I do have a Trinket Mage package of artifacts that cost 1. Starting off with Relic of Progenitus. It's a good Grave Hate card. It cantrips, or you can just let it sit on the board and just snipe out cards that the opponent chooses off. As we mentioned before, Expedition Map. It's a 1-cost artifact. Pay 2 and sacrifice it. Search for any land, put it into your hand. Really good for just filtering through your good non-basics. Then we have Soul Ring. Soul Ring is really good because it's a 1-cost artifact that taps for 2 mana. I mean, not much to say.
It's colorless ramp.
Yep. Then we have Sensei Stop. Sensei Stop's really good for filtering through your draws and everything. It's also always a draw at the at any time if you need it. It's just really hard to get rid of as well. Then we have the Azorius Key Rune. Good ramp. I mean, turns into a creature when you need it to be. Also, not really much to say. Alright, now here's a card I've been really surprised by. The Dalkin Shackles. This card is insane. Basically what this card is, it's a 3-cost artifact that you don't have to untap it. You can choose whether or not to untap it. You can pay 2 and tap it. Gain control of target creature for as long as Vidalcan Shackles is tapped. And the creature's power has to be equal or lesser to the number of islands you control. Basically, since you're a 2-color deck, you're going to have a lot of islands. So you can take even mid-range to even large creatures a lot of the times. I play 7 islands total. So a lot of the times I can just take big creatures. And you can just take them for however long you want. It's just an insane card. Alright, so now we're going to move on to enchantments. I'm going to start off with, I believe, the best enchantment ever. And that's going to be land tax. If you're not on the play and the person in front of you hits the first few of their land drops, it's going to put you so far ahead in card advantage, it's insane. You're not going to miss land drops, especially if there's a green deck in the game. It's just crazy when you lead on that. Then we're going to move to O-Ring. O-Ring's really good. It hits any non-land permanent. It's really good to exile. When it leaves play, the permanent comes back. So, I mean, it's not permanent, but it's awesome.
It's a good spell in general. It's removal, which is good. I mean, it hits anything. So it's very versatile. Except for lands, etc. But yeah.
Which, also, there's Detention Sphere. Does basically the same thing, but it hits any cards with the same name on it as well. Really good for token strategies, or even like Rider Replication or anything.
Mm-hmm. Any infinite strategies, as long as it's not like creature-wise or permanent-wise. As long as it's not, haste or anything like that. But it cannot hit itself, so if there's another player who has one, you can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Alright. And so then we're going to look at Rhystic Study. This card, along with Grand Arbiter, will draw you a ton of cards. People normally can't afford in the early stages of the game to pay for their spells, to pay extra, because for every spell they cast, they have to pay 1 or else you draw a card. Which, it just gets insane. If you draw 2 cards off of this, it's just crazy. Yeah,
this is the only taxing effect that you have besides your general in the deck. So it's not unreasonable. And, the card essentially reads, pay an extra mana for the spell.
Yeah, exactly.
At least
they basically cost 1 extra. Most players will pay because the card advantage shit puts you ahead. If they don't, is...
Yeah, giving a control deck super card advantage is never awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Then, for the last enchantment, we've got Omniscience. You can cast any non-land cards from your hand as though they were free, basically. It's just insane if you can get any kind of card draw.
It's one of the broken things he can do in this deck. It costs $1 billion, but that's
approximately.
Okay. Yeah, it's because when everything else after that is free, it's fine that it costs that much.
Exactly. You just tap out for it, and then if you can get something like a time stretch go off, give you a couple extra turns, you can just draw $1 million and then just play everything. Alright, then we're going to move on to Planeswalkers. Alright, so starting off, we've got Jace Beleren. He's really good. He can draw you cards, or if you're feeling particularly nice and political, you can give your opponent's card draw. Generally not recommended, but in a pinch it works.
Relevant.
Then you've got Architect of Thought. This guy's insane. He can hold off a horde of 1-power creatures. He can slow down creatures' attacks. And it even hits all opponents.
Yeah.
Yep. Until your next turn. All opponents' creatures are shrunk. Or no, it's... Yeah. It shrinks them all in.
Yeah, whenever an opponent attacks you with a creature, it gets -1/-0. Making 1/1s irrelevant.
And it's actually not even attacks you, it's attacks anybody.
Oh, attacks. Okay, so it's really good. It slows down all token strategies pretty much, unless the tokens are big.
Exactly. The -2 is mini Factor Fiction. It's just insane. You reveal the top 3, target opponent, splits them into 2 piles. You take 1 pile, the other pile goes on the bottom. It's just really good. It's almost always a draw 2, or draw 1 if it's a really good card. Then we have Venser. there's enough enter the battlefield abilities in this deck for it to be really good. If you can ever fire off its ultimate, it's just insane. Like, it is not hard to close out a game once you're just exiling permanents.
Yeah, and making creatures unblockable, it's not super relevant in this deck because all your stuff has flying, but it is an ability on him, and you do have to watch out for it sometimes.
Yeah.
It'll blindside some people.
I've never activated it personally, but, I mean, it may come up.
Yeah, I know it has, and it's sweet when it gets there because you play him or he's sitting there and they don't expect it, and you're just like -2, make my guys unblockable, kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
And because they're like planning out how their next turn will work, and they just completely read over that line.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with like Alice knowing just pumping all your small ground guys. Then we have Gideon Jura. This guy is insane for control. His +2 during target opponent's next turn, they have to swing with all of their creatures at Gideon, if able. And so, like, if they've got a huge army, they just it basically fogs you for at least one turn. His -2, you can destroy target tapped creature. And then his 0 says that he can become a 6/6 creature until end of turn, and
damage is prevented.
Yeah, damage is prevented from him. He starts at 6, so the first turn you normally have all creatures swing at him, so he goes to 8. If they don't really have enough to damage him much from there, you just start turning him into a creature and just start beating for a lot of damage.
And if you have extra turns, they do have to attack him. You know, they can do it to multiple opponents because his target opponent does it, not all opponents.
Yeah.
So you can do it to multiple opponents if you want to do that, or you can just add extra loyalty to it.
Yep. Alright, then next we're going to move on to creatures. Alright, so starting off with creatures, we're going to start with 2 of the really good value creatures that I just love. Phyrexian Metamorph can copy any creature or artifact for 3 and a Phyrexian blue. Basically, it's a 3 cost a lot of the time. It's really cheap. It's really efficient. It's just an amazing card. And then there's Phantasmal Image, which is just 1 in a blue. I mean, yeah, they can target it. Sometimes you just use it to get rid of a general or any other pesky legendaries.
Yeah.
Or it's just a really efficient way to just copy something awesome. And especially one thing to note, if, say, an opponent has a Palinchron, it goes infinite with Palinchron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really good, and like I said, or he said, it's removal for generals, which is really good in this format, especially hexproof guys. This gets around hexproof and shroud. If any general has hexproof or shroud, you can actually get rid of them this way. That's really important to do in EDH.
Yep. Alright, so then we're going to move on to some of the other utility creatures. We'll start with Snapcaster Mage. This guy is insane with Riptide Lab and pretty much any of the spells because there's just some crazy spells in this deck. Whenever it comes into play, it has flash. When it comes into play, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard has flashback until end of turn, where the flashback cost is its mana cost. So you just get to flashback all your spells that you've been casting throughout the game. It's just an insane amount of card advantage.
And he's a dude. He's an ambush viper.
Yep.
That's fun.
Then there's Gilded Drake. This guy comes in. He's a 3/3 flyer for 2 mana, 1 in a blue. When he comes into play, exchange control of him with target creature and opponent controls, I believe.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you sacrifice it. But it's a really good way to steal giant creatures and everything. They get a 3/3 flyer, so they're not too upset.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with giving you a 3/3 flyer to have either your general or another really strong guy. He's just extra value all the time.
There's enough insane creatures in this format. Alright, then we have a little bit of an odd one, Drift of Phantasms. It's 2 in a blue. It doesn't really matter as a card because it's not in there to be played.
Yeah,
it's in there for the transmutability.
He's a 0/5 flying blocker, like a defender. Like, he's never anything really super relevant. But you transmute him is the thing. You go get something with converted mana cost 3, and there's a lot of things in this deck. Anything from O-Ring to Jace Beleren. You can go fetch those and then play them. So it's just an extra one of all of those cards.
Exactly, and there's other creatures, and there's even some spells you can get. Just very versatile. Alright, then we have Trinket Mage. Fetches any of those 1-cost artifacts. They're really good and very versatile. It's just a really good all-around card. Aven Mind Sensor. This is it's a flash flyer 2/1 for 2 and a white. If an opponent would search his or her library, or search a library rather, they search the top 4 of that library instead. So, I mean, fetch lands, any tutor effects. This card shuts off so much in EDH.
Yeah, everyone wants to search your library because that's what adds consistency in EDH. So this guy allows you to stop your opponents from doing that. He's also a flyer. Sometimes they get there. He's really good because like they crack a fetch in response because he has flash. You can put him in play. They can only search the top 4 instead of their entire deck. That's a huge deal.
Then we have Solemn Simulacrum. This guy is just really solid. When he comes into play, he rampant grows, finds you a basic land, puts it into play tapped. When he dies, he draws you a card. Really good at getting people not to attack you. Really good card advantage. Then we have Venser. He has Flash. He's 2 blue for a 2/2. He is a wizard, and whenever he comes into play, he can bounce target permanent, or he can even return a spell to its owner's hand. So it's a counter spell when you need it to be. It's a bounce when you need it to be.
Yeah, it's a remand when you need it to be. It gets around uncounterability, which is, like I said, is very important. Because there's some spells that are uncounterable that you can't, deal with. He allows you to deal with them. He also allows you to deal with permanents on the battlefield that are troublesome.
All right, then we have Academy Rector. This is one of the guys that really became good when Omniscience came out. I mean, he's a 3. He's a
1/2.
It's a 1/2 for 3 and a white. Whenever it would go to the graveyard, you may instead exile it and then search your library for an enchantment and put it into play. So if he dies, he can find you Omniscience, put it into play, and then you can just go off from there. Really easy way to combo off that way. Then there's enough enter the battlefield abilities for Restoration Angel to be pretty good. Plus, just the combat tricks you can do with Restoration Angel are insane, as most people would know from Standard. This card's fantastic. Then there's Mole Drifter. Draws you a ton of cards. I mean, even if you evoke it for just 2 and a blue, it's pretty much a divination. Divination's alright. I mean, it's a good card.
He's a flyer. He gets there.
Yep. Then we have Sarah Ascendant. Some groups do errata the text to basically say 60 life.
Yeah, it's
as long as you have 30 or more life, it gets +5/+5 and flying. In my group personally, most of the time we play where it can come out as a 6/6 flying lifelink for 1. I mean, there's so much removal in this format, it's generally not the best thing you can do, and it draws a lot of hate. But I mean, it's just a really solid card, and it's just a great beater.
Yeah, it's really good value. It's just the question is debatable, like, because on turn 1, if you lead on this guy, like you're way ahead of everyone.
Yeah, you're pretty far ahead.
It doesn't matter how much card advantage your opponent has right away, because they don't have the mana to pay for any of the spells that can actually deal with him. So he'll get in at least 1 hit if you're on the play and you lead him.
But I mean, with 40 life, like...
Yeah, it's not a huge deal, but it's still a 12-point life swing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it can still put you pretty far out of range.
Yeah.
Alright, then with that, we are transitioning into larger creatures. We've got Sun Titan. This card's insane. It is card advantage. It gets you a lot of your awesome permanents back, from your creatures to your lands to your artifacts and enchantments, anything. And he is a 6/6. I mean, he is on the ground, but he does get there.
Yeah, he's a beat stick.
Yep. Alright, then we have Sphinx Magosi. This card's not insane, but it will draw you a lot of cards as the game goes on, especially way late in the game when you have a ton of mana. Like, just 2 and a blue, draw a card, and he even gets bigger. Like, the card's just solid. We have Angel of Serenity. It's a recent card from Return to Ravnica. It can get rid of creatures on the board, out of graveyards, whatever you need. It's a really solid card. Whenever it dies, the cards do go back to the owner's hands. So, I mean, you can always exile stuff out of your graveyard, bring it back to play it later. So, I mean, just all-around versatile card. Elish Knowing, this card is so swingy, it's ridiculous. It shrinks all of your opponent's creatures by -2/-2, pumps all your creatures by +2/+2. Just a huge game-winning card.
Yeah, it can board wipe token strategies. It does a lot of things. It allows you just to win the game, because all your dudes are huge. She also has a big butt herself. 7 toughness is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah. Then we have Chancellor of the Spires. This card's nuts. Every time I play with it, I love it even more. Whenever it comes into play, you may cast an instant or sorcery in an opponent's graveyard. Really good, especially if people were playing certain copy effects like Red Replication. Just goes infinite by itself. There's plenty of other stuff like Grabbery or Tooth and Nails that are just insane. Alright, and now we're going to move on to the spells.
Oh, other thing about Chancellor's Fires, it's relevant. You can reveal it from your hand on your upkeep, and your opponent mills.
Alright, so now we're going to work on spells. Starting off with Mystical Tutor. It sets up miracles really well, and it's just really good for just finding any instant or sorcery that you need in any instance. Next, we have Enlightened Tutor. It finds any of your artifacts or enchantments that are just really good. And it puts them on top, of course, but it's an instant, so you can always do it end of turn.
Or right before you draw a bunch of cards.
Yep. Then we have Azorius Charm. This card is just really flexible. What it can do is it can give your creatures lifelink until end of turn. It can just cantrip by just drawing a card. Or it can put an attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So it can be removal in a pinch, or it just draws you an extra card.
Yeah, say if they're attacking you, and they crack a fetch land or something to make their Avengers Zendikar tokens a lot bigger. You know, you can check the Avengers Zendikar in response to the shuffle, and it'll shuffle in their deck.
Well, I mean, it has to be attacking, so...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're attacking you, because that's, the proper play, is to fetch it while you're attacking.
Yeah.
You do things the last possible second you can do them. That's just better. That's what you do with instants or sorceries or activated abilities. You do the last second you can.
Get the most information.
That's what allows you to do.
Alright, then next we move on to Idyllic Tutor. Finds any enchantment. There's some really good enchantments. If you're mana starved, you can find a land tax, you can find Rhystic Study, you can find the Omniscience if you got plenty of mana.
Yep.
And just need a combo off to kill.
And it puts it in your hand, opposed to putting it on top of your library.
Yep. I mean, it's only a sorcery, but still really good. Next we have my overall favorite card, Fact or Fiction. This card puts opponents in really tough places. You reveal 5 cards. They sort them into 2 piles. You pick a pile and put it in your hand. The rest go to the graveyard. And so you normally draw 2 to 3 cards off of this. And it just puts people in really awkward positions when there's really powerful cards. Next we have some of the really powerful spells that basically just win the game nearly on their own. Time Stretch. When you take 2 extra turns, especially in blue decks, you can just do so much throughout the game from then on. Next we have Blatant Thievery. It's a 7 cost for blue, and for each opponent, you gain control of target permanent that player controls. So you can steal lands, you can steal planeswalkers, you can steal creatures. It's just really good.
Most of the time in EDH, it's a multiplayer format, so it's going to be more than one person playing. So you take, normally 2 or 3 permanents, and it's obviously the best permanent they have out too. So it's normally really good.
Exactly. Next we have Rite of Replication. Card's just really good making copies of creatures. If you pay 9 mana into it, you can make 5 copies of a creature. Alright, then we have Blue Sun Zenith. Draw X cards, just really good. Same with Sphinx's Revelation. It gains a little bit of life, which isn't too irrelevant, but I mean, still draw X cards.
Yep.
Then of course we're moving on to our removal spells. Swords and Path, just really good. 1 mana removal spells, just deal with something now.
Yeah, pretty much every white deck in EDH runs these guys. They're really good. Swords is one of the best removal spells ever because life totals don't actually matter.
Especially in EDH.
Yeah, you have so much life in the first place, and then life gain on top of that. You're going to eventually grind out your opponent. As soon as you get control of the game, you'll win it. It's not going to be super important life-wise.
Yeah, exactly.
Path is actually probably the more dangerous one, but sometimes people don't actually run basics if they're in high color demand decks, like 5-color or 4-color decks.
Yeah, exactly.
No
they run a lot of low basic counts.
Yeah.
Next we have one of my personal favorites, Banishing Stroke. Every time I play this card, it gets better and better and better. You can miracle it for 1 and put target artifact, enchantment, or creature on the bottom of its owner's library. It is an instant. I mean, it costs 6 normally, which honestly isn't that much when you talk about EDH, especially with reducing costs like Grand Arbiter. And when you miracle it, it's just such a good feeling to just 1 cost remove anything.
And it Tux General, it's really good. You can Mystical Tutor for it, so the miracles really really relevant. It's just really good. And since you have library manipulation, you have Sensei's Divining Top and stuff like that, you can put it on the top where it actually matters, the miracle cost. So most of the time you are casting it for its miracle cost. And since you draw a bunch of cards in your opponent's turns and whatnot, you can actually miracle it on their turn also.
Yep. Then we have Dismantling Blow. It destroys target artifact or enchantment for 2 and a white. You can kick it for 2 and a blue. If you do, you draw 2 cards. So it's a removal spell all the time, and if you have the extra mana, it's a draw spell. It's just a real good card. Next we have Return to Dust. If you play it during your main phase, you can remove 2 artifacts and enchantments from the game. Otherwise, it's an instant that just removes 1.
Yeah, it removes 4. It's 6 ways, not both. That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah.
You can also do it, on your opponent's turns and only do 1 then, but most of the time you cast it on your turn.
Yep. Cyclonic Rift. Not much to say about this. 7 mana.
Bounce everybody's permanents. Yeah, whatever. That's not a big deal. Like bouncing everybody's permanents for 7 mana and not your own. It's not bad at all.
There's just not much to say about it.
No.
It's just so one-sided. Just your general sweepers. Akroma's Vengeance. Destroy all creatures, enchantments, and artifacts. You can cycle it.
If you don't need Wrath, or you have like 3 Wraths in your hand, like it's fine to cycle it.
Exactly. Planar Cleansing. Destroy all non-land permanents. Really good for just sweeping the board.
Yeah, it's one way to deal with planeswalkers. There's not a whole lot of ways to deal with them. So that's the way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Since Akroma's Vengeance and this next card doesn't do it, Austere Command.
Austere's really good though.
I mean, all the commands are generally really good. You choose 2 of the modes. You can destroy enchantments, or destroy artifacts, or destroy creatures under 4 or over 4. So, I mean, it's just a really good card. Next, you have Day of Judgment. Destroy all creatures. Really generic.
Yeah, Wrath of the Gods is normally a little better because it says it cannot be regenerated, but it still does the same thing most of the time.
Yeah, it's rarely relevant.
You really don't have to worry about it with Run.
Yeah. Alright, then Terminus. It's such a great feeling to miracle this one especially. You just tuck all creatures.
Yeah. I mean, does everything Banishing Construct does, except artifact or enchantments.
Yep.
But it does everything, so.
Exactly.
That's your swap.
Supreme Verdict can't be countered. Just destroy all creatures again. You just really want redundancy and everything in this sort of deck because you always want to make sure you can Wrath when you want to Wrath. So that way you don't die.
Yes, since you're a control deck, you got to be able to control things. And if your opponents are, destroying you with creatures, you can't live long enough to actually take control of the game.
Exactly. And like with Martial Coup, I think it's the best Wrath. You Wrath all creatures if you pay at least 5 for X, and you put X tokens into play that are 1/1 soldiers. Sometimes it can win the game if you pump enough mana into it. Otherwise, it can just Wrath and then just give you enough chump blockers to let you live for a while.
Say you Wrath for like 7, get 7 guys. The next turn, like after you're done Wrathing, your guys are unsummoning sick, so you can attack with them now, and you slam an Elish Norn. Like that will kill people.
Exactly. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the counter spells. I don't run too many, I just run 6. Because I've noticed as I play more and more, counter spells really just grind you out of your card advantage. Your opponents will still have plenty of cards in hand while you still have 9 because you're trying to control multiple opponents.
Yeah, and you cast counter spells to stop your opponents from doing broken things. But the problem is, your counter spells, you can't cast them by themselves to actually help you win the game. Your opponents are casting creatures that will help them win the game. So they only stop things, so you can't have too many of them.
Exactly. So we're going to start off with Force of Will. Really good because a lot of times you have to tap out for things. So, I mean, just exile a blue card, pay a life, counter target spell. Really solid. Rewind, counter target spell, untap 4 lands.
That's all it does. But it's really good because you don't have to tap out.
Then we have Hinder. You can counter target spell. If it's countered this way, put it on the top of its owner's library or on the bottom. You would choose.
Yeah, you normally put it on the bottom so they don't draw it again. But sometimes, if the spell's not relevant right now, and next turn it won't be relevant at all, put it back on top.
You just waste their draw step also.
Yep.
Then we have Cryptic Command. This card, it says choose 2. You can draw a card, counter target spell, tap all creatures all opponents control, or bounce target non-land permanent. So it's just really good. It's card advantage. It's almost always a 2-for-1.
And you get to do, it's very situational too. If you need to not die, you can tap their creatures. You can bounce a permanent that's giving everybody trouble. Countering a spell is always sweet, and drawing cards is good too.
Yep. Overwhelming Intellects. This is a card I haven't really seen much of. It's a 6-cost counter spell, counter target creature spell. You draw cards equal to the converted mana cost. So I mean, it's just really good when you can counter like a Rune Scarred Demon or something like that. Just draw a million cards.
Yeah, I mean, I used to run it. I don't anymore. I gave it to him. It's really sweet. When it's good, it's awesome. When it's okay, it's okay. You know, because it's 6 mana. That's a lot. So sometimes it's actually just dead in your hand.
Yep.
And sometimes the creature you need to counter doesn't cost a lot, so you don't get to draw a bunch of cards. But when you do, you normally are stopping something super powerful because they cost a lot, and then you draw a billion. So it gives you an awesome case of the feel goods, and your opponent's a case of the feel bads.
Yeah. And speaking of the feel bads, we have Daze. This card has just been a complete blowout every time I've played in EDH. Nobody plays around it because they just want to cast their spells on curve.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to max out everything. Like, you're not going to have somebody leaving one extra after a Genesis wave or something like that. And so then when you just play Daze, just the simplest card ever, it's just a complete blowout.
Yep. When no one has any cards in hand, it's so dead because, they play whatever they draw.
Exactly.
And that's the only downside. It's free sometimes because you can turn an island to your hand. It just blows people out because they just don't expect it.
Yep.
This is not a format where it's really played heavily either, so they're not really worried about it. And it's also a 99 card deck of singletons, so having it all of the time isn't something they expect either.
Not like in Legacy.
Not like in Legacy, yeah. That's where it's mainly played, but it's really good because of that reason.
Yep.
And that's it.
Thanks for watching.
Mm-hmm.